I heard for a while that when you sign a franchise quarterback, then the window's going to close, and can you win? Is it going to happen? And I felt like everyone was kind of talking about this wasn't around like Lamar Jackson that the window's going to close sooner or later. But I think everyone forgot to mention that this window for the Buffalo Bills almost seems like it's cement shut, given what has been going on. And today, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, and I'll start with you. The cuts here of some really, really important players, specifically Jordan Poyer, and then Tre'Davious White, who's been injured. But these are massive signing or massive releases for a team that still, if I'm not mistaken, is not under the cap yet.
No, they're not. So the Buffalo Bills, as you see on the screen for those watching, Adam Schefter reports that the Bills entered today $40 million over the cap. Had to release guys like Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, who's a very good center. He's going to have a lot of suitors. Deontay Hardy is he all pro? I'm not sure if he's all pro.
Local guy.
Oh, that is right. Also local guy, return specialist, stud. But then they had to release Tre'Davious White. His actually doesn't open up until after June 1st because of the designation. And then since this tweet was put out, they had to restructure Von Miller's deal, which is kind of what has led to this whole sticky situation. Was the 6-year $120 million he got has really put a damper on that cap situation there, to say the least.
Yeah, so this is not the situation you want to be in if you're the Buffalo Bills, right? And I think right now there's a lot of question marks. And I love the Bills team, right? And Rock, maybe you can feel like this is great, but hasn't this conversation always been kind of not saying it's defending Josh Allen and the Bills, but this is a problem, and the Bills really haven't gotten over any hump. They have been to the AFC Championship game now, it was 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And now they have so many more question marks about what they're going to do moving forward. And quite frankly, that AFC East, hypothetically, if you're looking at the Dolphins and the Jets and the Patriots have to get better, that division's going to get harder as they move forward.
Yeah, I think, Rip, we're going to get a better idea of what the Bills look like under the cap and who they add, who they bring in, and who they draft in the offseason. And then we'll be able to kind of look at that big picture more and say, okay, Buffalo is going to absolutely suck this year, or okay, maybe they can contend and compete in the AFC with the team they still do have on the roster. But to me, I was just watching the notifications and it was one after the other after the other. I can't even imagine being a Bills fan. Like, imagine if that happened with the Ravens right now, and if you saw some big significant names just get released because you were so much over the cap that you had to get rid of people. It would be insane. I mean, I've seen Ravens flock through the good times and the bad, and the panic meter and the happy meter. So you can just imagine how they would react to this. Zach especially. He would.
Ravens fans overreacting?
No.
Never.
Well,
Never
especially
happened.
not on Twitter. I only see people use the most common sense.
And you never would overreact on Twitter, Zach, specifically.
Especially not.
Never.
No, not at all.
But this, to my point, though, this would be something to kind of overreact to. You would be justified if you were overreacting to this as a Ravens fan if this happened in Baltimore right now, because what's going on in Buffalo, it's like, what is happening? It's crazy. But it needs to be done clearly because they need to get under the salary cap.
Yeah, they certainly do. And that's something that that's talked about. That's just the way it is. But when you're looking at this, right, the Bills still have a lot of talent. But Kevin, there's like the other question mark of it was, Stephon Diggs, the situation. They could save money there, but if you get rid of a guy like Stephon Diggs, what the hell do you have on offense there? Yeah. Because because Gabe Davis, correct, is also up for a contract. He's a free agent. So we got some issues.
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid came on the second half of the season. James Cook did some good things for him, but wide receiver wise, there was already a question mark if Diggs stays there. They have literally, they just cut Deontay Hardy, who did play some wide receiver for him. Davis is up for whatever contract he's going to get, whether it's in Buffalo or somewhere else. If you take away Stephon Diggs, you'll get a haul for him, but then you have to replace him. And with the way wide receivers are now, teams want to just get their guys under contract. We saw the franchise tags with T. Higgins and Michael Pittman, etc. So, I mean, do you go to free agency and sign a Calvin Ridley? Well, he's worse than Stephon Diggs. Marquise Brown is worse than Stephon Diggs. Devontae Adams seemingly isn't going anywhere. So Josh Allen, I mean, he's a really talented quarterback, but you got to put talent around him, much like you have to do with every other quarterback. And outside of Kincaid and James Cook, if you don't have Diggs, you really don't have a lot there. Plus, you just gutted your defense with pretty much all your veterans. So.
Yeah, and if you're going to be a consistent then contender, because everyone's saying, well, wait a minute, Patrick Mahomes and that offense. Okay, Travis Kelce going to be a Hall of Famer, one of the best tight ends. You either have to have a brilliant head coach, and Andy Reid is brilliant, and you're going to have a quarterback that can elevate. And right now, Patrick Mahomes, credit to him, man. He's fantastic. Yeah. Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, obviously that defense was incredible for the Chiefs this year. The Bills have had trouble getting over the hump in the playoffs, and it's ironic that the most talk is going to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, which again, we already know that whole conversation. Well, go ahead, Brad.
I'm just trying to understand, like, they're $40 million over the cap after the adjustment, correct?
I think it was before. I'm pretty sure it was before.
So then they're still $7 million over?
Yeah, they're still over.
Actually, I'm not sure with the Von Miller restructure and then Rasul Douglas. I think it's going to be close, but they'll be under it after June 1st for sure with the whole.
But they have to get under before Monday, or before Wednesday.
Yeah, so it's going to be.
And so that's kind of like I'm a little bit mind blown. I mean, Brandon Beane, GM of the Bills, had to have known that this was coming for a while, right? Like, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that they were this far over the cap. I guess my question is that, like, if I'm the owner of the Bills, I'm looking at Brandon Beane being like, how did this happen? How did we get to this point? Like,
and that's like what we talk about with the Saints, where they're like 80 million over the cap every single season, and they brought in Derek Carr, who's on a $100 million plus contract.
And so far, all that's gone off to a great start.
And that's my point. Like, and you look at, I mean, the Bills obviously a great team, but you look at somebody like the Saints and whatever, they pay these players all this money, and there's nothing to show for it. Whereas you have like all these big names on like the Ravens, for example. So, and they're able to get them into some pretty cheap contracts. I think this is more or less of an Eric DaCosta appreciation comment here, statement. Yeah. It's just that, like, all the things that he did this past season, and was able to still remain under the cap with some ridiculous talent.
Yeah, you know what? For that, can we give an Eric DaCosta appreciation clap here for the second here? Can we get some Eric DaCosta appreciation?
I kind of forgot I was wearing a Saints jersey at first, so I just saw myself on the screen.
Yeah,
the Saints. The Saints are always just hilarious to talk about. I love how you brought it up, because every year it is like somehow the Saints are $80 million over the cap, and then they somehow still are players in free agency because they restructure everybody and their mother in that organization every year.
Crazy.
It's a skill to be able to maneuver the cap that they do, but that's why, at least when people are saying,
it's a big deal too.
Well, and so that's what I meant, is that without Gabe Davis and you have Stephon Diggs, I mean, Khalil Shakir looked really good in moments last year. But again, as we've seen with teams, the Bills are going to have to run the football more. That's definitely seems like when they took over, that was a very good formula for their success down the stretch. But at the end of the day, you're going to need more than Stephon Diggs to make consistent plays. And down the stretch, when they shut him down, where he wasn't as involved, you could feel the presence of it. So we'll see how that goes.